What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into MLS Digest. This is 15 and 15, where we go over the most recent match week of MLS action. And we just had the first midweek slate of the season in match week 13 on Wednesday. With 13 games, 4 teams were off, and we're already looking ahead to rivalry weekend with so many juicy matchups coming your way on Saturday and Sunday between some really good rivals. But midweek, we had a lot of action that also delivered in many ways. So let's get into all the storylines you may have missed. Unfortunately, though, the first game of Wednesday's slate was a bit of a snooze fest, but not a complete surprise here. A 0-0 between DC United and NYC. NYC with definitely the better of the play, but this was kind of a very rainy, sluggish game. And Benteke also got injured super early into this match, re-injured. And so without him, DC United's woes continue even further. NYCFC as well, just kind of picking up points here and there, but also haven't been all that consistent. They look forward to the weekend's match against rivals New York Red Bulls. Montreal held the Crew to a 1-1 draw just a couple days after picking up its first win of the season at NYC, so a little bit of momentum building for Montreal. Eventually, though, the Crew capitalized on a really poor mistake from that back line, and pretty much a fair result in terms of how the game played out. The Crew also rotated a little bit due to the fact they have that Hell is Real derby coming up against Cincinnati. No Gazdag and no Rossi. So a little bit to be expected. Montreal not an easy place to play, and they'll move on and take the point. Only still just one loss on the season for the pesky Crew, who are now back-to-back games with draws, but they did come back to earn those points at the very least. Orlando got the better of Charlotte yet again, 3-1, and they were just on it from minute one. Muriel actually scored earlier than his actual first goal, but it got disallowed, and then he followed it up just minutes later with one that would count. Zaha eventually getting Charlotte back into it after they were down 2-0 with a piece of individual brilliance and open play that we really haven't seen from him too much this season. But Charlotte's defense, once again on the road, just pinned in way too deep, looked super uncomfortable, and it's yet another bad road loss against at least an average or above team, whether that be in the East or West. And so, yet again, they get caught out, and Ojeda specifically has been balling for this Orlando team that is now 10 unbeaten going into that matchup with Miami. It's really incredible how the jokes almost keep writing themselves for the Galaxy, and it's yet another game without a win and just another sucker punch, going up 2-0 before halftime and then eventually losing on a stoppage time winner, Tyberibo with the brace. And just it has to be a mental block at this point for the Galaxy, because there were some really good moments in that first half, including Royce on that second goal, just being so creative and showing that composure that he was kind of brought to bring in certain moments. But then the game approach in the second half was just completely defensive. The Union tied it within 5 minutes after the second half, and the mentality and the discipline on those little details just isn't there for the Galaxy. And next up, the Galaxy have El Tráfico against LAFC, which is really rounding into form at the same time with a win against Seattle, which we'll get to. And then the Union traveling to Atlanta, which has been abysmal, but picked up a point in midweek action. Union continuing to look for their hot streak, and the Galaxy, it just really never gets easier for them. And you can't really expect them to, get a win against their rivals in a matchup that really hasn't favored them in recent history. Cincinnati went to Toronto and escaped with all 3 points thanks to another brilliant moment from Kevin Denkey with just an individual run from the right wing into the box. I thought he did maybe a little bit too much at times and could have shot that ball earlier, but eventually created enough space for himself to curl it in. Really poor group marking from Toronto, not really something you've seen from them all that much this season, even though they aren't obviously a top team. Defensively, they've been solid for the most part. Cincinnati subbed off most of its top guys early on in that second half, clearly looking to preserve themselves for that crucial matchup against the Crew on the weekend. And as for Toronto, it's kind of the same old in terms of the one way, in terms of their results all season. It's been 1-0 for them or against them, and not a lot of action between both sides in a lot of their games. And only just one home win on the season It came up against DC right before this match, but once again, spiraling back down, zero consistency in Toronto. Dynamo picked up just their third win of the season. They've all come at home against Minnesota with a 2-0 victory. With midweek, obviously, rotation was expected by most teams, but Minnesota rotated almost entirely ahead of their matchup with St. Louis on the weekend. Despite, personally, I believe that Minnesota had the less kind of wear and tear entering this match than Houston did, with both still being an open cup as well. But Minnesota clearly kind of just throwing this one away in that sense. Houston went almost basically full strength, had a couple of players on the back line either out or injured or suspended. But regardless, Houston got the job done, got a late goal early on in first half stoppage time, and then eventually put things away. Minnesota, I think this was more of, like I said, a bit of a throwaway game, and I'm sure they'll, with a full strength lineup, bounce back against St. Louis. Nashville picked up its first ever win in its history against the Red Bulls in midweek, 2-1. Much bigger of a gap between these two teams than the scoreline may have suggested. Nashville once again completely controlled this game with their possession, and week by week, match by match, they continue to grow, and the patterns of play, whether that be in patient possession or in transition, everyone is just getting involved, and it just looks so fluid compared to what the Red Bulls product has been week by week. They just beat the Galaxy 7-0, but once again, like I kind of talked about entering this matchup, I still have to see it consistently out of the Red Bulls. And besides a Choupo-Moting header, a good sequence of play just individually on that goal, really, it's just not enough in some matchups like these. And Nashville at home also has been a wagon, winning all of their last 4 there in Nashville. In the first true derby matchup of the week ahead of the true rivalry weekend, St. Louis and KC split the points 2-2, but St. Louis will be really ruining this missed opportunity for the first 3 points in a long time. They went up 2-0 before halftime, and then in about 7 minutes, it goes completely undone with a couple of bad moments, and St. Louis just sitting in too much, allowing Kansas City to pile on waves of pressure, even though they haven't been all that brilliant or, elite in terms of playing in possession all along this season. But that St. Louis side just a little bit too desperate for the 3 points, and it ended up hurting them. Pompeu with one of the goals of the midweek slate for sure to open things up, and then a bit of a lucky deflection and bad moment for Pulskamp on that Teicher goal, but still better signs from the St. Louis attack, which I've been kind of expecting based on the additions, just people getting a little bit more healthier, and Berkey came back for this one as well, but just that back line just couldn't hold up eventually, and Kansas City will take the win at home in the earlier matchup in this season, and then also now this draw. So they're going to take the season series per se and move on with that. That's definitely one they'll take. Not a win for either, but definitely it feels like one for Kansas City on the road. Once again, it's another draw here in a cross-conference battle as Austin and Atlanta split the points kind of as expected from what I was thinking ahead of this match. Not much really separating these two sides. These are the two sides that spent the most money in the offseason, and it was a Brandon Vasquez free kick that got Austin ahead, but then once again they just can't really work too many moments in transition, even though that's where Austin should be and is a little bit the most dangerous, but that's not really saying much because they haven't been capitalizing on those sequences of play too much. And then eventually Atlanta gets the equalizer in stoppage time through TRA, and it's a pretty fair result. Atlanta, it extends their winless run. For Austin, it just keeps them in those lower playoff standings in the West, and neither really deserve this win. They have just not been showing good enough sequences and chemistry for all the attacking talent they have by the numbers. Another draw here in the second 0-0 draw of the slate, but I think this was the more exciting of the two between this match and NYC and DC. There were a lot of chances on both ends, and especially late, one of these teams definitely should have stolen it. I think Portland had the better of the chances, had one really good opportunity cleared off the goal line with one of the defenders that got into position there. And a little bit of rotation out of Portland at the same time. Meanwhile, RSL, the depth isn't really there, and also they were missing almost, all of their center back options. So you had wingbacks or fullbacks slotting in to the middle of that back line, and that made things a little bit complicated in terms of playing out of the back and being as comfortable. So maybe not the most unexpected result, but probably should have been a goal or two in this game. A little bit unlucky on both ends. But Portland will certainly take that point ahead of their derby with the Sounders this weekend. LAFC got its revenge on the Sounders after losing 5-1 in Seattle very early on in the season. And they also took it to them from minute one. Seattle really over-rotated after that win in Houston. And of course, they're also looking ahead to the matchup against the Timbers on the weekend. So completely understandable. LAFC's midfield, I think, depth just outclassed the Sounders in this case, because the Sounders do have a couple players injured. And also Ferreira, who started this one, has been dealing with his own injuries and also only been getting a couple of, small appearances here and there. So good to see Cengiz Ünder get on the score sheet, because he's actually kind of been out of favor with Martinez starting a lot, even though Ünder was the one brought in for this short loan and is obviously the much more experienced player. But Martinez has been playing fantastic as well. And Bouanga adding to the goal scoring tally late to eventually make it 3-0. And he's just, finally, once again, rounding into form, and LAFC climbing up those standings, and they have a big date ahead with the Galaxy. San Diego got its own bit of revenge against the Rapids, because the last time these teams met, it was 3-2 for the Rapids in Colorado. McVay with the early goal and Dreyer to clean things up, and he's really been the one that, when the games have opened up and they've taken leads, he's been the one to really kill teams off a lot. He's really been benefiting from those moments of transition and just a little bit more of open space. Mihailovic missing the penalty, you really don't see that from him often. He's been great at being the penalty taker and on set pieces, but the Rapids now, it's 3 losses in a row after falling to DC and San Jose before this. The nightcap certainly delivered in San Jose as the Quakes and Miami played out to a 3-3 draw, one of the most hyped up regular season games of the Quakes history, no doubt, due to the fact that, of course, Messi was in town and the people showed up and the goals showed up. 5 of the 6 being scored in the first half, though, and then eventually Allende tying things up. There were plenty of more chances in the final half an hour, but no one able to bag the winner, and ultimately a fair result based on how everything played out. Chicho Arango, though, going down with injury. That's going to be one to monitor for sure for the Quakes, because him and Martinez have certainly been killing things in that kind of 2-striker setup. Martinez did come off the bench in this game, though. It's good that at least they have Hernan Lopez back, and so kind of trade that star power a little bit. Not everyone is out at the moment, and they can certainly overcome that with the talent they have. But in the meantime, Miami will be playing Orlando on the weekend, and the Quakes will be at the Revs. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Unfortunately, the Week 14 preview won't be able to happen, so apologies about that, but we'll be back for Week 15. In the meantime, enjoy Rivalry Weekend. There's going to be a lot of great matches. If you're interested in the best bets, I'll have those posted for the weekend when I can, and I'll see you guys all when I see you in the next video.